The actual corpus of canons that we have, the body of canons, the corpus of canons that we have in the church come from ultimately two sources: conciliar activity and then the patristic writings. So above all, the greatest, by far and away, the greatest portion of the corpus comes from conciliar legislation, and these also are broken down into two sources: local councils and then what we would call ecumenical councils. In each of these situations, the conciliar activity that took place met for whatever reason as part of their deliberation, as part of their work. They wrote in response to varying problems, issues that the church was facing. In a conciliar manner, they sat down and discussed matters and wrote then out canons in response to problems. This is a key point with regard to the canonical tradition, that the conciliar canons especially were written by committee, often, conciliar deliberation, in response to one or another issue. Now, that doesn't mean that every issue that every council faced was something that was faced worldwide. Perhaps one father at the church said, I have this problem. I need this problem addressed. And the rest of the council said, oh, yes, let's deal with this. Other canons most likely came from a more widespread problem. The canons that derived from the ecumenical councils, which would be First Nicaea, First Constantinople, Ephesus, Chalcedon, and then Second Nicaea, the canons are alongside their doctrinal definitions that came down. Of course, for First Nicaea, we only have the canons, but for Constantinople, we have the promulgation of the Creed. For Ephesus and for Chalcedon, and then Second Nicaea, we have other work that these councils elaborated on. We have their definitions and their canons. One of the other councils, major councils in which canons were issued, and it's unique in this way, would be the Council in Trello from the end of the 7th century, that met exactly to complete what the 5th and 6th councils had lacked, and that is namely issuing church councils. These councils had met and only formulated doctrinal definitions. The Council in Trello, wanting to complete their work, according to the Emperor Justinian II, wanted to complete their activity, complete their work by issuing canons. And they issued some 102, wide-ranging, covering all aspects of church life. The fathers who gathered at that council clearly had a number of issues that they wanted to deal with. So you have these ecumenical councils, but then you also have a series of local councils from the earliest days of the church, and then going to what we would now say we would attribute to the era of Photius, which some people would also attribute to being ecumenical councils, but that's not universally received. But you have the early councils of Ancyra, Laodicea, Neo-Caesarea, Antioch, Gangra, and then the Carthaginian canons came in at a certain point to the Byzantine corpus, Prima Secunda, and then there are a couple of councils at Hagia Sophia and Constantinople that were also incorporated eventually into the corpus. These councils, it's not clear exactly in each instance why they met, but nevertheless, part of their deliberative process was the issuing of canons. So you have conciliar activity on one hand, on the second, or on the other hand, you have the patristic texts. Many patristic fathers wrote, because they were very active churchmen, they were Byzantine, or not Byzantine, but they were Orthodox churchmen, bishops, who not only were they great in the fathers in terms of theological formulations, but they're active pastors. And as active pastors, they often wrote down solutions to various problems. And what is especially great, what I particularly value about the patristic canons is, compared to the conciliar canons, the patristic fathers often wrote why they were coming to the decision that they were coming to. So Basil the Great, marvelous, wonderful among the canonists of the church, spent considerable time in what we now call his canons, which are really letters to another bishop, Bishop Amphilochius, who's also a saint in the church, who had posed questions to Basil. Basil wrote back long answers, not canons, but letters that were then the church later parsed out into canons. They're marvelous for explaining how and why he came to the decision that he did. His brother Gregory of Nyssa, likewise, in a canonical letter that he wrote, is very, very interesting in discussing his methodology as a bishop seeking to apply an authentic solution to a problem that was facing the church. Other canons by the fathers were not as detailed as either of these fathers, but the canons from Cyril of Alexandria, certainly Theophilus, Timothy, they do go into a little bit more elaboration of why they came to their decision. The other Cappadocian father, St. Gregory the Theologian, has a canon attributed to him, but it's basically a poem elaborating the books of the Bible, the canonical books of the Bible. His influence is very interesting in the canonical corpus, though, because he was a very deeply influential father in the Byzantine Church. And his theology, but also his work, and I'm thinking especially his oration on speaking theologically, a time to be quiet, a time to speak, where he speaks about order, taxis, which is a key component within the canonical tradition, everything being properly ordered, permeates the entire life, or I shouldn't say life, but the entire body of canons. This deep conviction about order. And it's here, if I could say, just a pause or make a tangent here. The order is not just everybody follow an order or some sort of cuckoo clock precision or military parade order, but it's a deep sense of everything emanates from the heavenly realms, comes down, and the earth should mirror what is there in heaven, beginning with God, should come from heaven here on earth, and then to lead us back up into heaven. And this is the fundamental order that Gregory the Theologian speaks of, and exactly as a basic premise of the canonical tradition. So his work, while not being deeply, I signal him out as a father because he's deeply influential to the canonical tradition, not in the same way of Gregory of Nyssa or Basil the Great, but in his own very particular and important way.